everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. We have got an absolutely loaded is not even the right word to use. I mean, we just, what a great weekend of football. I mean, seriously, some great college football on Saturday. I will say, touch on Alabama a little bit later on the show, maybe just for a couple minutes, if nothing else. But obviously, some massive games in the NFL yesterday. 3 of the 4 lived up to the billing. Seattle, Baltimore, which I'll get into in about 45 minutes, it was not. That was a sleeper, okay? Unless you're a Baltimore Ravens fan, if you're a Seahawks fan, you wanted to turn the television off as quickly as you could. I'll discuss that game in about 45 minutes, while Baltimore is by far the most terrifying team in the NFL, and that's coming from a Steelers fan. But we did beat them. We did beat Baltimore, even though they might have handed the game to us. Also, obviously going to get into Dallas and Philly in just a second. What an outstanding game, start to finish, in the city of brotherly love yesterday at Lincoln Financial Field. After that, going to discuss the Bills and the Bengals, why the gap between Burrow and Allen looks as big as ever, and simultaneously why it's time for Buffalo. And I said this a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, it's time for Buffalo to consider making change at head coach. Sean McDermott's not the guy for multiple reasons, of which I will detail in about 15 to 20 minutes from now. Also going to get into the Kansas City Chiefs, why there's actually some precedent for their offensive struggles. The defense is actually what's winning these games for Kansas City after their win against the Miami Dolphins, as well as why it's probably going to get worse before it's going to get better for Miami when you look at their schedule moving forward and kind of their identity and their DNA as a football team right now in 2023. Also get into the rest of the games around the NFL. Why Joshua Dobbs, how about Josh Dobbs, ladies and gentlemen? Why Josh Dobbs' performance against the Atlanta Falcons was more impressive than even CJ Stroud, who tore the Bucs apart yesterday in Houston. I'll discuss that later in the show. And of course, at the end, we got a really good football game tonight. Really good Monday night game between the Los Angeles Chargers and the New York Football Jets. Very, very fascinating. Just given that I don't think there's that big of a talent difference. Obviously, at quarterback, there's a huge difference between Justin Herbert and Zach Wilson. But nonetheless, it's definitely be a fun game. I'll predict that at the end of, the end of today's show. But before I even get into Dallas and Philly, I did want to say this. So a lot of you out there know, before the NFL season started, this had to have been, it's actually the Monday or the Wednesday, one of the two before the season started, which was that opening Thursday night game between Detroit and Kansas City, which doesn't feel like it was that long ago. It's hard to believe that was 8 weeks ago. But I said, okay, I've got a goal to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the football season. So by Super Bowl 58, which is February the 11th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Shout out to the Raiders, what they did yesterday. But I set the goal to get to 1,000. And as of literally last night, and I can announce today, November 6, 2023, we're not to 1,000 yet, but we have reached 500 subscribers on Carving It Up Live, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for yourselves here who supported the show. Man, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. Listen, again, I consider myself one of the luckiest human beings in the world. I get to do this, and obviously, there's a lot of podcasts out there, and this is no way to take shots at other shows out there, but being completely honest and transparent, that's always what I try and do with you, the audience, is when you put the work, when you put the time in that I do, and by the way, like a lot of other content creators out, to get the validation of people who feel like they should take the time out of their day to watch what you have to say. It's one of the most humbling things I can possibly tell y'all. So thank you guys so much for your support. It means the world. But we're at 500. I think we're actually at 501. We hit 500 last night. Got another subscriber after that. But we're $4.99 away from the ultimate goal of 1,000 subscribers by the Super Bowl. I honest to God believe we can get there. So again, if you have subscribed, thank you so much. Tell a friend to tell a friend about it. If you have not, again, literally just takes a couple seconds. If you're on YouTube right now, subscribe button right down there. It's the red one, says subscribe, hit it. You're part of the Carving It Up family. So greatly appreciate the support that we have and that I have on this show. So let's talk about some sports. That's why y'all are here, right? But first, Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, down to literally the last play. Philadelphia improves to 8-1, 28-23 win over Dallas yesterday at Lincoln Financial Field. Basically, every good player or every elite player for both squads showed up and played big in virtually every capacity. Where we thought Philly would be great, they were. Where we thought Dallas would be great, they were. Where both teams were weak, that ended up kind of playing itself out. And I kind of want to get into the Dallas aspect of this because Philadelphia did what I mostly thought they'd do. I actually thought they'd score more than they did. I said Dallas would win 34-31. Philly ended up scoring 28, and they did most of their damage in the first half and in the third quarter. But I thought what was interesting about Dallas. So I said coming in, I said, this is one of those games where everybody, I said back in week 5, everybody's like, oh, Dak has to play well against San Francisco. I said, no, he doesn't. They make virtually every quarterback they play look bad. And like, let's not act like Dak is a bum if he doesn't play well against them. He didn't play well against them. Everybody freaked out ever since he's played awesome. But I said, now, if Dak plays poorly against Philly, yeah, I'm gonna give him some heat on Monday's show because A, Dak owns Philly. B, Philadelphia's pass defense, as we saw yesterday, and frankly, as we've seen all season, is terrible. Bottom 10 in the NFL. But listen, Dak, I almost never say this in a loss. You guys know, former Cowboys fan, or maybe for those who don't know, former Cowboys fan here, but forever a Dak fan, Dak Prescott fan. I almost never say what I'm about to say in a loss, but I'm going to go into it. Rain Dakota Prescott in a game that featured Jalen Hurts, featured Lane Johnson, featured Jason Kelce, A.J. Brown, featured Devontae Smith, featured Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Hassan Reddick. It featured Micah Parsons. It featured CeeDee Lamb, Zach Martin, Stephon Gilmore. Pick your future Hall of Famer. Pick your Pro Bowler. And it was Dak Prescott who's the best player on that football field yesterday. And to argue otherwise is intellectually dishonest. Dak Prescott yesterday, 29 of 44. 374 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, QBR of 72, 0 to 100, 72, pretty darn good, and a passer rating of 115. So Dak Prescott was absolutely sensational yesterday. And I don't know, listen, if there's any, sort of my overarching takeaway from the Cowboys is, if you had any doubts about whether they can compete or even beat the top teams in the NFC, the beat part, we're going to have to set that aside for now because that's to be determined. Because Dallas, if you look at their next 3 games, they're against some either bad teams or mediocre teams. They play the Giants and Carolina the next 2. Both teams are awful. And they play the Commanders on Thanksgiving. Commanders are frisky, the potential playoff team. But Dallas is absolutely better than them. They should take care of business from there. So the whole beating good teams, we're going to have to put that aside because Dallas hasn't beaten an elite team yet. But in an NFC that is as top-heavy as you-know-what. Remember when LeBron said that years ago about the Cavs? He said the Cavs are top-heavy as you-know-what. That's what the NFC is. They are awesome at the top and awful at the bottom. Like the Giants, again, aforementioned Giants, Panthers, terrible. Bears, awful. Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Detroit. I know Seattle got humiliated yesterday. I still like Seattle. Seattle's a very good football team. Like those upper echelon teams in the NFC, we would not be shocked if any of them get to the Super Bowl. Frankly, one of those teams will be the team that gets to the Super Bowl. But if you have any doubt about whether Dallas could compete, especially given what San Francisco did to him just 4 weeks ago, just a month ago, I think that got pretty much erased yesterday. And if you're a Cowboys fan, if you are, and Dak Prescott elaborated on this after the game, he said, yeah, it sucks in the moment, but there's a lot of good we can take from this. And usually, anytime I've watched a lot of Dak Prescott press conferences and a lot of quarterback press conferences, and they say that, you're like, that's not really what we want to hear right now. We lost the game. We lost in heartbreaking fashion. They're in the red zone, and we went backwards a whole bit. I get that. But they say football's a game of inches. Literally inches. And Dallas did not even play outside of Dak. They didn't play that well. Dak and CeeDee Lamb. Those two were sensationals. They've been just about every week of the season, certainly in the last month. Dallas' defense played pretty well in the fourth quarter, but some of that was aided by some pretty conservative play calling by Philadelphia. I don't know if it was to keep Jalen Hurts healthy, which I understand. But if you look at Dallas, you say yesterday, you say timeout. Okay, we have a play at the goal line, a 4th down and goal, where Dak throws a quick option play to Schoonmaker. It looks like he's Luke Schoonmaker, the tight end, who they drafted this year. Looks like he breaks the plane to score. Turns out they show the replay. He catches the pass, but his knee's down, and the ball is literally a half inch, not that close, but a half inch, it feels like, from the end zone and from the Cowboys getting at least 6 points in that drive. And then you have later on, Dak throws a touchdown to something called Jalen Tolbert, and he steps out of bounds of a 2-point conversion when it initially looked like he had scored. So that's minimum 8 points that the Cowboys left on the scoreboard yesterday, which ended up, of course, being a huge difference. But if you're Dallas, you're like, okay, Dak can go toe-to-toe with the best in the NFC. That's clear. I mean, we knew that already, but I think yesterday it became pretty evident. CeeDee Lamb is, and I'm ready to say this, folks, I was skeptical about CeeDee Lamb going into last season. By now, a year and a half later, that's a top 5 receiver in the NFL. This week, Pro Football Focus's highest graded receiver in the NFL was CeeDee Lamb. The only guys that take over CeeDee are probably Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, and Justin Jefferson. Definitively those 3. Then you start to get into discussion about Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, a lot of other guys you could consider. CeeDee Lamb is 100% in that category. His ability as a route runner, his catch radius, he's faster than sometimes you may give him credit for. He's good at making plays after the catch. So CeeDee's that guy. But if you're Dallas, you're like, okay, elite quarterback at the other side, elite offensive line. I mean, we held them to 100 rushing yards. That's good if you're Philadelphia, but the same breath, you're like, they didn't run wild on us. Fourth quarter, we shut them out. As far as the Cowboys offense is concerned, okay, they couldn't stop CeeDee Lamb. Frankly, not many people can, if we're being honest. Sure, we held Brandon Cooks in check, but because Dak is that type of quarterback, he got guys like Jalen. Who's Jalen Tolbert? Jalen Tolbert would be a 3 in New England, a number 3 receiver in New England. Let's be honest. Jake Ferguson, fine tight end, nothing special. Dak made him look good. Okay, that is a positive as well. A couple inches, and we get 6 in the red zone on a touchdown. By the way, Philadelphia fumbled not once, not twice, but 3 times, recovered all of them. So you're like, okay, eventually one of those plays is going to go to us. Jalen's going to throw a pick, whether it's in week 14 or whether it's in a potential playoff matchup, or Jalen's going to fumble because Jalen has had the turnover bug this year and throughout most of his career outside of last season. I think for Dallas today, you're like literally a couple inches, and we're 6-2, leading the division. And I got good news, Cowboys fans. Great news. A lot of folks I've seen today, and some of these TV shows are saying, oh man, it's going to be almost impossible for Dallas to come back. Now, oh, no, it's not. If the goal is to win the NFC East, oh, Dallas is very much still in it. You look at the standings, you're like, hey, Bryson, Philadelphia is 8-1. Dallas is 5-3. The math, Dallas does not control their own destiny. Correct. But the good news is, I mentioned, Dallas plays the next 3 weeks. They play the New York Giants on Sunday. And by the way, today, as we sit here on Monday, November the 6th, the Cowboys are 16.5-point favorites against the Giants. My guess is they'll win. They've got at the Carolina Panthers, who have a single solitary win on this season. They play the Commanders on Thanksgiving. They should win that game. They should expose Washington's terrible offensive line. Then you got Seattle at home. That's a tough one. I know we saw Seattle yesterday. Talk about them later in the show. But Seattle's still a very good football team at home, meaning Dallas. That's going to be a tough one. Then you have Philly on Sunday Night Football. Meanwhile, Philadelphia at Kansas City in 2 weeks. Both them and the Chiefs are on a bye. Then they got the Bills. They should win that game. San Francisco, that's no slouch game. Then Dallas. Look, if Philadelphia goes 3-0 in those games, I think they'll beat Buffalo. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat San Francisco or frankly even Kansas City, although Arrowhead's a really tough place to play. If Philadelphia goes 3-0 in that stretch, then Dallas's goose is probably cooked. Because after Philadelphia plays Dallas, then they have Seattle, which is tough. Then they finish with Giants, Cardinals, Giants. They're going to win those 3 games in all likelihood, assuming they're healthy. But if you're Dallas, I think your head should be about as high as it could possibly be. Mike McCarthy called a good game. Yes, was there the sack at the end in the red zone? Was there the penalties at the end of the red zone? Sure. But Terrence Steele, save for yesterday when he was abused all day by Montez Sweat, has been a pretty good right tackle in his career. He had a bad day yesterday. Pro Football Focus gave him a grade of 15, 0 to 100, 15. I think we all know by test scores isn't very good. He gave up 4 sacks on the day. That's not going to work. You have to anticipate Terrence Steele as a potential Pro Bowl level player would be much better. Our right tackle didn't play well. We had no running game to speak of, which, by the way, probably won't be the case given how good Philly's run defense is. Dallas, too, props to McCarthy. He had the right game plan. He's like, if we win, it's going to be on the arm of Dak Prescott because our running game can't beat Philadelphia. And frankly, really nobody's running game can beat Philadelphia. Our O-line didn't play that well. Running game was non-existent. Defense struggled throughout most of the day. But because our quarterback is top 10 in the NFL, clearly not even close, not even in the slightest bit of a debate, we almost won. They played really well. We played okay, and hey, a couple penalties go away. By the way, I thought Philadelphia, and you know me, I don't blame officials. Philadelphia got a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in terms of the whistle, in terms of some calls that were debatable at best. There was a missed hands to the face on Michael Gallup. I mean, there were some calls late game. You're like, probably should have went Dallas's way in that situation, but they weren't. Home team tends to get the whistle. That's how it goes sometimes. But I think you have to feel great if you're Dallas today. You're saying we should, if we're a good football team at least, a Super Bowl contender, we should win our next 3 games, probably pretty convincingly. Philadelphia, we all be shocked if they go, I wouldn't say we all be shocked, but if they go 3-0 in the stretch, they're probably the best team in football, to be honest with you. But, and again, I don't think that they will go 3-0. It's going to come down to week 14. Dallas, Philly, in Jerry World, basically for the division, given the 2 team schedules the rest of the season. If you're Dallas, they should look good about yesterday. I really do. And so they match up physically with Philadelphia, and few teams do. They were able to generate a little bit of pressure on Jalen Hurts, not as much pressure as the Eagles defense was able to generate on Dak, but still, Micah Parsons was able to get to Hurts and make things tough on him a couple times. I think I feel pretty good if you're Dallas. I really do. Dak, Lord have mercy. He was on one yesterday. And let me tell you something. I watched carefully. You guys know, as the Dak Prescott defender in all of sports media, I was watching these shows today. I'm like, I watch it carefully. I said, if anybody, I got a haircut yesterday from my amazing father, amazing dad. Shout out Dad. He's the best barber in the world. And I'm like, okay, I already lost some of my hair yesterday. If anybody goes at Dak, I may look like Sir Patrick Stewart today. Okay, I may pull it all out. So I shot it. It's the great Sir Patrick Stewart. It was close. Patrick Brown's in the comments. Big Cowboy fan here. He says, what's good, bro? Happy Monday. Beautiful day. Mild fall weather. Long live the grid. Amen, Patrick. Happy Monday to you as well. Listen, where I'm at in Tennessee, you can't tell that it's fall. I'll tell you that. We're pushing 70 today, and on Wednesday where I'm at, it's going to be darn near 80. Like, I didn't know we moved to Southern California or Southern Florida. Jeez, Arizona gets a lot hotter than that, but, the weather's pretty good. I can't complain. I cannot complain 1 ounce. Okay, so, and again, last thing on Dak, and then we'll move on to the Bengals-Bills game. I was thinking about this with Dak Prescott, and I should probably go back and check by Wednesday's show, that if you take out Mahomes, who by and large has been Mahomes, not quite what he was last year when he won league MVP, or even a few years ago, more on the Chiefs later in about 20 minutes. Take Mahomes out, take Lamar Jackson out. And let's, I guess, take 2 out, although this is highly debatable. What quarterback has been better than Dak this season? I love Trevor Lawrence. Frankly, I think Trevor's better than Dak. I think Trevor is a generational talent. Trevor has not played by every stat, metric, number, whatever you want to throw out there. Trevor has not been better than Dak this season. Joe Burrow, now in Joe's defense, he was hurt early in the season. Joe Burrow has not been better than Dak this season. Josh Allen definitely has not been better than Dak this season. We got on Dak for the turnovers last year. We're silent as doves with Josh Allen this year and virtually every year because he's a turnover machine. We'll put that aside. Jared Goff, maybe. I mean, you start running out of guys where you're like, we don't really know who the MVP of the league is right now. If you had to give me a vote today, I would say Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar has been the most consistently good because let's be honest, it's a quarterback award, because the value of the quarterback position far exceeds any other position on the field. But it's not Lamar by a mile. You look at the Cowboys' schedule, month from now, we may be having serious discussions, and assuming Dak plays against Philly like he did this year and like he did last year and the year before that because he owns Philly, we might be I said Dak would finish top 3 in MVP this season and Dallas would be the 1 seed. Both I still believe are in play. I'm just telling y'all that could become a real conversation very, very soon. Look at Dak's numbers this season. What do we got? Hold on. Let me pull it up hang on. I want to give Dak the respect he deserves if nobody else will. Dak Prescott, there he is. So he's got 13 touchdown passes, only 5 picks. So we're halfway through the season. Remember, Dak said he wouldn't throw 10 interceptions this season? So far, so good. He's got a total QBR of 67, which is top 5 in the National Football League. Over 2,000 yards. Listen, if there's any knock on Dallas, this season, because I think the 2 teams you saw in Philadelphia are the top 2 teams in the NFC and 2 of the top 5 teams in all football. Honest to God, believe that. I think those over San Francisco, over, I love I shouldn't say they've almost become my Detroit Lions. I love the Detroit Lions. Love them. I think these 2 teams are better than Detroit. These 2 teams are better than Seattle, San Francisco. You start looking at it, but if there's any knock on Dallas, then we'll move on to the Bengals and Bills. It's, good Lord, they're relying on Dak. The Bengals, again, about to get into them, are very, very reliant on Burrow, but they have Joe Mixon. They have a spectacular defense, one that, frankly, is better than Dallas's. If you think Buffalo's pretty darn reliant on Josh Allen, you could probably put that in the same class. And despite that, Dak's been better than Allen. Who else? Kansas City's pretty reliant on Mahomes, but he's the best quarterback on earth, so that's kind of to be expected. But you start looking at quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson. They rely on Lamar Jackson, but not in the way that they did the last few years, where it's like Lamar carry the offense. Not so much anymore. Todd Monken has taken a lot of that load off of Lamar. You look at Dallas now, it's Dak, you have CeeDee Lamb, who's a top 5 receiver in the sport. Then it's a bunch of guys, a bunch of Jags. Remember Bill Parcells? I quote him often. He calls, just a guy is a Jag. A lot of Jags out there for Dallas. Brandon Cooks had a catch for 7 yards. Jalen Tolbert, again, I think would be the 2nd or 3rd best receiver, best case scenario in New England. I mean, we don't exactly look at Ferguson as Jake Ferguson is the equivalent of Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, or heck, Darren Waller. That'd be the knock on Dallas, but then again, I've said for a while they need a true number 2 receiver, and I frankly don't think they have that. That's a knock on Dallas. That is a fair one, but I still think they can win the NFC, honest to God. Okay, to the AFC now. The marquee matchup of the AFC, at least here in the United States, obviously with the Dolphins and the Chiefs earlier this morning. The Bengals beat the Bills 24-18, not 17. Bills went for 2 on a late touchdown to get back in the game, pull it to within 6, but Bengals won, was all said and done, 24-18. That is now 4 straight W's for Cincinnati. For the record, how about the AFC North? I heard Mike Tirico say this after the game. We know the AFC North is the toughest division in football. That goes without saying. But this is mind-blowing to me. Every team in the AFC North, all 4, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Cleveland, all 4 are at least 2 games over 500. And today, if the playoffs started today, all 4 are in the playoffs, which would be the first time in the history of the league that that's ever happened, where 4 teams, every team from one division has gotten into playoffs, or at least from a 4-team division has gotten in. So this AFC North, it is a dogfight to get out of this division. Baltimore looks like the clear leader in the clubhouse, but I'll tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, Cincinnati is not far behind. I said after the Seattle win, after they beat the Seattle Seahawks, I said, watch the heck out for Cincinnati. Buy all your stock in the Bengals right now. Because remember, I was very low on Cincinnati, not as low as some. Some were writing the Bengals off. Oh, they're done. They're 1-3, as if we haven't seen them come back from a rough start to the regular season and end up having a tremendous year. We saw them last year, 0-2, got to the AFC title game and nearly won it. Start 1-3. Joe Burrow's not playing well because he's injured. The calf is bothering him. But I said, when he played well against Arizona, and then they skated by Seattle, I said, uh-oh. Should have gotten Cincinnati now. Bye week. Extra time for him to rest. 13 days for Joe to rest. And then he plays San Francisco last week. Plays outstanding against one of the better defenses in football. Looks mobile. And how many times did you see that yesterday? How many plays? There was one in the first drive in particular where he broke out of a sack, rolled out to his left, and found an open receiver. That's who he is. I've defended Joe for the longest time in that there's not much to defend Joe on. He's the 2nd best quarterback in the sport. But you could tell where it's the only people like, oh, the knock on Joe is he's not as mobile as who? Lamar Jackson? That's about it. I mean, seriously, when you look at his ability to make plays outside the pocket, we saw this at LSU. We saw it at LSU, and we've seen it in the National Football League here in Cincinnati. You saw it last night. By the way, Joe Burrow's stat line, it was a typical Joe stat line. It was spectacular. 31-44, 348 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 0 turnovers, QBR of 82, and a passer rating of 108. I'm shocked the passer rating wasn't higher, but that's Joe was fantastic. By the way, with really no running game. With no running game. Buffalo did a good job of keeping Joe Mixon and company pretty contained, at least up until the last drive. But Joe was absolutely outstanding. And before I even get into Buffalo, let me just, can we put we know Mahomes is the best in the league. He's going to be the best in the league for the next decade and a half. Can we stop the argument about who's number 2? Seriously, nobody. I said coming into this year, Trevor Lawrence was my MVP pick. Thus far, he obviously is not that. I still think Trevor's had a really good season, but I said by season's end, Trevor would be at least in the discussion to be the second best quarterback in the league. He's not. I still got him third, way higher than most. I still think by season's end, he will be regarded as the third best of the league. We'll put that aside for the moment. You can't honestly tell me that you would, watching what we've watched this year, last year, year before that if you started a franchise today, you had the second pick in the draft, first team took Patrick Mahomes with the first pick, that you would sit there and take Josh Allen over Joe Burrow. I would take Joe Burrow, and it would take me about a half second to make that decision. That's not to say Josh Allen isn't good. I think Josh Allen's elite. I think Josh Allen is undeniably one of the 10 best in the league. Top 5, that's dicey at best. Upside is off the charts, but as we saw last night, decision-making leaves a lot to be desired. And Josh Allen is one of those quarterbacks, one of those guys, and I was big on Josh last year, picked him to win MVP. Josh is one of those quarterbacks, one of those human beings, like he's so easy to root for. He plays his tail off. He's a good guy off the field, great in the Buffalo community, big arm. It's cold, but Buffalo hasn't won before. This is the best chance they've had since the 90s with the Jim Kelly offense and all those guys that they had back in the day. He's so easy to root for him. Buffalo gets all these national TV games, and he can't help himself sometimes, folks. He can't. The interception he threw in the first half. What are you doing? Backed up in your own territory. Corners playing inside. Why are you trying that? Why are you trying an inside throw when the corner's playing inside? And again, Josh Allen's numbers look good. 26, 30 of 38, 258 touchdown, the aforementioned interception, QBR 62, pass rating 85. It's fine. Do I think Josh Allen is an okay quarterback, a fine quarterback? No, I think he's an excellent quarterback. He's elite. I think the Buffalo Bills can win a Super Bowl with him at the helm. More on their head coach later. But this notion that he's in the same class outside of mobility and arm strength, which, Tom Brady did not have a world-class arm. He's the best player that's ever played in the sports history. Outside of those two, what does he do better than Burrow? Burrow's better in the pocket. Burrow's more accurate. Burrow's decision-making is better. Burrow, and this isn't a shot at Allen, but Burrow seems to have a better command of the huddle in the locker room. When the fit hits the shan, Burrow seems to, okay, let's rally the guys. Let's keep everything in perspective. Joe Burrow with his press conference last night. We want to know this week. Like it's cliche. We kind of roll our eyes like, it's the same old, politically correct answer. But Joe's one of those guys, kind of like Jalen Hurts, where you hear him say something in a press conference that sounds incredibly cliche, but you actually believe it. And I think the locker room believes it. Burrow, even after the game, talking about his health. Melissa Stark, NBC, was asking, what's the biggest difference now with your leg, or I'm sorry, with your calf, when you were injured and now? And Joe said verbatim, I can run. And you saw that yesterday. Using his mobility to his advantage. He's not as mobile as Josh, but he's mobile enough. He's no Lamar Jackson in terms of mobility, but he's also no Jared Goff. He's like that healthy medium, have like good in between. I think I wouldn't quite put him in the category of Mahomes. Mahomes is a different monster making plays outside the pocket. Joe's not terribly far behind. So yeah, I'm seeing this today. Cincinnati's back. They've been back. Oh, you talking about after they beat San Francisco last week? Heck, you could argue 3 weeks ago when they beat the Seattle Seahawks, they've been back. Coming off the bye last week, Burrow looked as healthy as he ever has. Last night, he looked even healthier than that. If you're a contender in the AFC, and there's plenty of those, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Jacksonville, you gotta be looking on your heels at Cincinnati and be like, oh, that's not good. Man, I wish they would have lost at least one of those two games between Arizona and Seattle. But they've won both. They've won these last two. Bengals are the real deal. Bengals are a top 5 team in the NFL. I don't think the defense is spectacular. The defense is top of the league in virtually every statistical category. They get to the quarterback at a high rate. Hubbard played well last night. Now they need to develop more of a running game. Again, they only had, 54 yards rushing last night? If I can pull this up here. Yeah, Bengals had 54 rushing yards on 22 carries. It's only 2.5 yards a carry. It's not great. You'd like to have a little bit more than that, but when you have the quarterback to the level of Joe Burrow. And you, by the way, you can tell the difference in his health from, I mean, the last, to me, game where Joe Burrow did not look 100%. Matter of fact, he barely looked 60%, was that Titans game. Remember when Cincinnati got blown out 27-3 to Tennessee, and Burrow had an awful game. No touchdowns, no interceptions, had a QBR of 14, and he was bad. Bengals only scored 3 points. By the way, 3 weeks before that, scored 3 points against Cleveland when he rushed back from injury. Last 4 games, he's been the second best quarterback in the league. You could argue first. It's either him or Mahomes. Spectacular game by Joe Burrow. For the Bengals, and I said this when Buffalo knocked off Tampa Bay by the skin of their teeth last week. I said I think we need to, and I said, by the way, I said it after the Patriots game too. I became more resolute in this after the Buccaneers game, and more so even today. I think Sean McDermott is a very good head coach. You got to recognize what he took over. He took over a Buffalo Bills team in 2017 that had not made the playoffs since the Music City Miracle. Think about that. Remember Music City Miracle? It was like the Titans' breakthrough moment in 1999. Bills had not made the playoffs since that moment. Took over, and I like him, but with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, made the playoffs. If I remember correctly, almost beat Jacksonville, who made the AFC title game. So Buffalo had a really good year in 2017. Then they drafted Josh Allen. A little bit of a developmental process. Year 2, 2019, got to the playoffs. Year 3, AFC title game. Year 4, with John, come that close beating Kansas City in the infamous 13-second game for the Chiefs. But you're like, okay, we've got our guy, which, by the way, they still very much have their guy in Josh Allen. But we're on an upward trajectory. And it's gone down ever since. Since Brian Daboll left, and I know Giants fans hate Brian Daboll's guts today. In his defense, he doesn't have much to work with in New York. But since Brian Daboll's left, Josh Allen's regression has been pretty undeniable. If you look at this, if I can pull up his turnover numbers, because they are absolutely staggering what he's done in terms of turn the football over. He had, if I could pull this up, because it's been, I think he had 30 turnovers not too long ago. So I'm sorry, just pulling this up in my notes, folks. I apologize. Okay, so first of all, he's had 9 turnovers this season, this year. But Josh Allen had over 20 turnovers in 2022. 20 fumbles and interceptions. This year, he's 9 interceptions. Now, is some of that a Josh decision-making thing? No question. But is it you need an OC, you need a good offensive coach to kind of reel him in, hold back, Josh, pull him back, let's restrain him a little bit, because Mahomes' decision-making, which at times can be dicey, but Mahomes overwhelmingly, by and large, is good in terms of his decision-making with the football. Burrow is one of the best in the world at it. Burrow simply does not throw interceptions much at all. You don't have that offensive coach to kind of reel him in. And who I think Sean McDermott is, if I want to use an NBA example, he's Mark Jackson. And that hurts me to say, because I love Mark Jackson. I will fight. I will die on this hill that Mark Jackson should still be an NBA head coach. Should still be in the NBA. But Mark Jackson was perfect for what Golden State needed at that time. They need a steady force, a steady presence, guy who builds players' confidence, developmental coach. And guess what they did? Second year with the Golden State Warriors, made the playoffs and won a playoff series. And then that next year, won 50 games, came that close to beating the Clippers in 7 games, a more talented Clippers team. But I remember first year as a Warriors fan was, for me as a Warriors fan, was the last year of the Mark Jackson era. And you saw, if you watch Golden State now, then compared to now, a lot of ISO. It was Steph, save us. Steph Curry, this up-and-coming talent. 2014 was his first All-Star season. Steph Curry, save us. Doesn't that kind of feel like how it is now with Josh Allen and Buffalo? Running game is non-existent and has been ever since Josh has been there. O-line has never been good since he's been there. Offensive line is consistently, by Pro Football Focus, ranked in the bottom 10, sometimes the bottom 5 in the NFL. In terms of, Josh is a little bit similar to Dak, and this is why I put Dak over Josh, because Dak's better with what he's given compared to what Josh has given. Josh has Stephon Diggs, who's an elite wide receiver, arguably top 5. After that, it's Gabe Davis. I like Dalton Kincaid, but he's a kid. Dawson Knox, I mean, there's a reason they drafted a tight end. There's some limitations there. Feels like this team's kind of hit its ceiling with Sean McDermott, just like the Warriors hit their ceiling with Mark Jackson. Then they brought in Steve Kerr, who instituted this offense where it's not Steph save us, it's Steph take advantage of the matchups opportunities you're going to get. Hey, this is going to unlock Klay Thompson, who had his first All-Star season in 2015. Draymond was an All-Star the next year, 2016. It opened up things for Golden State. It was more of a shooting-based offense. Move the ball. Very efficient, very San Antonio Spurs-like. It's why I've suggested, ever since the Bills lost to New England, remember when Mac Jones led that game-winning drive 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I said I think they need to fire Sean McDermott at season's end, go out and get Ben Johnson in Detroit. Now, coordinators, even the best, aren't always home runs. I mean, there's always that one coordinator, Josh McDaniels, who gets a job, you're like, yeah, this isn't working. He was better as a coordinator than he was a head coach. He can't command the presence of a locker room. Maybe Ben Johnson's that, maybe he isn't. But it wouldn't hurt if you tried. Because it feels like now, if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, Bills Mafia, be honest, it feels like you kind of gone about as far as you can with this iteration of the Bills. And a lot of folks get on Stephon Diggs for getting emotional. Oh, Stephon Diggs, he's being a diva wide receiver. But I think what Stephon Diggs recognizes is, guys, Josh is still really good. I'm still really good. We missed our window. With this iteration of the Bills, we missed our window. Does that mean we can't open another one? Of course it doesn't. But there needs to be structural changes. And it starts with the top with Sean McDermott. I mean, how many times? This is like the fourth time, I think, that in the Bills offense was virtually non-existent until the last 5 minutes. I mean, last night, up until Josh Allen threw that touchdown to Stephon Diggs with a little over 3 minutes left of the game. How much time is left? 3 minutes. And let's put this in perspective. 3 minutes, 32 seconds, 3.5 minutes left in the game when Josh threw that touchdown to Stephon Diggs. So for the first almost 57 minutes of the game, they had 10 points. Last week, 2 weeks ago rather, against the New England Patriots. And what we've seen, despite Belichick as the head coach, has not been a very good defense this season. Buffalo, until the final 7 minutes in that contest. The final 5.5 minutes, the Buffalo Bills had 10 points. There's limitations there, and they shouldn't be this bad with that guy at quarterback. Is he Joe Burrow? He's not even close. But is he 10 points until the last part of the fourth quarter bad? Of course he isn't. We've seen the upside with Josh Allen. The last great Josh Allen was that playoff loss to Kansas City when he went toe-to-toe with the league's best. It's there. Stephon Diggs is there. Both guys in their prime. Buffalo, by the way, has been a pretty good drafting team. They need a new coach. Now, I don't think firing him this season is going to change anything, because if you fire him, Ken Dorsey's probably your head coach, and I think that could go even worse. I think there's limitations for Ken Dorsey as an OC, especially if we compare him to what Brian Daboll did his last 2 years before he went to be the head coach of the Giants. Buffalo's in a weird spot, and I'm seeing people today say, oh, Buffalo might miss the playoffs. I've been telling you that. Buffalo lost the games. They lost the easy games of their schedule. They lost to the Jets with no Aaron Rodgers except for 4 snaps. They lost to the New England Patriots. Heck, they nearly lost to Tampa Bay. I mean, Buffalo is what they are, 5-4. Again, I think you are what your record says you are is kind of a case-by-case basis. But when you consider what they put on tape, that looks like a 5-4 team that's going to be a 9-8 team. Because the bad part for the Bills, this was they just finished the easy part of their schedule, because they were playing teams like the Giants, who look how bad the Giants are. Barely survived the Giants. Lost to the New England Patriots. Almost lost if Chris Godwin turns around on a Hail Mary and brings in what was a perfectly thrown ball by Baker Mayfield. They lose that game. And now's the hard part. They just lost to Cincinnati. They play a Broncos team next week coming off of a bye. They play the Jets, who they lost to and who Josh Allen turned the ball over 4 times against. They play the Eagles after that. Philly has a significantly better roster and coach, and not significantly better quarterback, but a better quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Then they got at Kansas City, home against Dallas, at the Chargers, home against the Patriots, who they lost to, then at Miami. I mean, it does not get easier for Buffalo, and I see them finishing 4-5 to end the season, finishing 9-8, winning record, sure. The Pittsburgh Steelers way, right? Finishing with a winning record and missing the playoffs. I mean, today they're not a playoff team. Matter of fact, they're not even the first team out. Look at the standings right now in the AFC. It's Buffalo in the playoff standings. It goes 1-7. Kansas City, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Miami, Pittsburgh. That's unbelievable. Browns, Bengals. Next team after that, the Jets. The Zach Wilson-led Jets. There's difference in coaching. That's the gap in coaching. I mean, my Steelers have been outgained. Then we'll move on to Kansas City. My Steelers have been outgained in every single game this season. And yes, there are limitations at quarterback and at OC. Somehow, some way, they're 5-3. Why? Situationally, they're good. Defensively, by the way, Sean McDermott's a defensive coach. The defense isn't that good. They've lost some players, sure, but we've seen teams in the past lose some key defensive players. I mean, Pittsburgh lost their starting linebacker. They've had injuries to Cameron Hayward. Their defense is still top 10 in the NFL in virtually every statistical category. That's the difference in coaching. Now, Mike Tomlin's a Hall of Famer, so maybe we shouldn't be comparing Sean McDermott to Mike Tomlin, but there's levels to this, and we're seeing that with the Buffalo Bills right now. So yesterday was a massive gap in quarterback play, and frankly, in the two quarterbacks, and a gap in coaching, and it's not like I think Zach Taylor is Vince Lombardi. I always say about Zach Taylor, he doesn't screw it up. He's not a great, innovative guy, but he doesn't screw it up. It's more you could say about a lot of guys. I'm telling you, I was just watching that game, I'm like, Buffalo still thinks they're a contender. They still think they're a contender. They're not. They are not. I mean, I caught some flack about, was it 3 weeks ago? When they beat the Giants, very ugly game, played very poorly, probably should have lost if not for clock management error by Tyrod Taylor. And people got on me for not putting him in Bryce's best 10. I said, this is not, I'm taking 10 teams easily over Buffalo. Now I'm taking about 12 teams over Buffalo. If I had to do Bryson's best 12, Buffalo's not in it. They're not. Comment from Patrick Brown. He says, I feel as if the window is slowly closing for Buffalo. 3 years ago, I said to keep building, they break through. As of today, I'm convinced on an inevitable, I can't talk today, ladies and gentlemen. An inevitable move is occurring in 2024. Man, Patrick's throwing out these tongue twisters here in the comments. But yeah, I think the inevitable move is a change of head coach, Patrick. I do. And again, I don't think Sean McDermott's a bad coach. This isn't one of those situations where it's, God, if they could just get a competent coach. Sean McDermott's more than competent. Sean McDermott's a darn good coach. I'd say upper echelon of the league, top half of the league. But do I think there are better options out there? I mean, I don't think Sean McDermott is Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels is an awful coach. Josh McDaniels has wasted a lot of talent, particularly in his stint in Vegas. It feels like Buffalo's kind of squeezed out every juice that they can out of this particular orange with what they can with the roster that they had and with Sean McDermott. And it feels like now they're just trying to find that last little drop. You know, like when you've got a drink with ice in it. Like if you go to a local fast food place, you got the straw, you got your drink. And when you're done, you're like slurping to try and get that last few drops in there. That kind of feels like where Buffalo's at. They're just trying to grasp that last little bit, and it's not there. It's just ice. And the ice is 9-8. This is what it is. That's where they're at. Oh, fired up show today. Dallas Cowboys going to be fine. Buffalo Bills are not. You know, Dallas and Buffalo both have 5 wins, are in very different positions right now as franchises. By the way, so the Steelers. I still think Pittsburgh's a playoff team. John Rivera in the comments, Fan Perspective Podcast. John, let's go Jets. Well, I will predict y'all's game at the end of the show. How about that second Monday night game for the New York Jets? And Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if, I'm sure you saw this, John. I don't know if folks out there saw this. The video of Aaron Rodgers walking to the Jets locker room. No crutches, no walking boot, heck, no noticeable limp. I mean, we all kind of assumed he was done. It's an Achilles injury for a 39-year-old. I might have been mistaken. It's amazing, Aaron, what modern medicine can do for you, isn't it? I'm just saying. He looks good, though. Saw him throwing last week before the Giants game. Listen, if Zach Wilson and the Jets can keep this thing afloat, just keep it afloat. Don't mess it up. Tonight's a tough game. They're 3-point home dogs against the Chargers. But keep the ship afloat. Bring Aaron back. You could be Could be in position. John said he's playing this year if we're still in playoff contention. Well, even if they lose tonight and drop to 4-4, they're very much still in playoff contention. Because again, this is the easy part of it. We mentioned Buffalo. They're going backwards. Their schedule's awful. Jets' schedule's easy. I mean, they got the Chargers tonight. That's tough. At the Raiders next week, all of a sudden seems like a really tough game on a short week, given how Vegas played with the coaching change. At Buffalo, I think they're more talented than Buffalo. I think they have a better roster than Buffalo, and they just beat Buffalo. So that's a winnable game. Dolphins is tough, but we know Miami doesn't like physical teams. They got the Falcons after that, Texans, Dolphins, Commanders, Browns, Patriots. And there's some winnable games in here, even without Aaron Rodgers, as we've seen this. But they beat the Eagles. Patrick, I touched on this a little bit on Friday, but I'm willing to do it again. Patrick says, your thoughts on George Pickens' cryptic IG swipe of Steelers photos. Here's my thoughts, Patrick. So George Pickens, those of you who don't know, superstar. And superstar wide receiver for the Steelers. You see it when he gets the ball. So George Pickens, the context provided is that, and this isn't carving up the context, I'm just providing it. 2 catches for -1 yards against the Tennessee Titans this past Thursday night game. And in frustration, George Pickens wiped away all Steelers photos. He even put an Instagram story where I think it had somebody kind of defending him, and in tiny, tiny, tiny letters, tiny font at like the bottom right corner of the caption, it said "Free me." So listen, my thoughts are this. Do I get why George Pickens is frustrated? Absolutely. I think this is one of the 10 best receivers in the league with the potential to be one of the 5 best receivers in the league. Whether it's a Kenny Pickett thing, and he's not getting him the ball, whether it's a Matt Canada thing, and Pittsburgh has plenty of weapons. Nobody's as good as that guy. That said, it does need to be handled in-house. For the record, CeeDee Lamb, remember CeeDee Lamb had that quiet game against San Francisco when he wasn't really getting the football. He was very frustrated. You saw it on the sidelines. And after that game, he had a conversation with McCarthy. He had a conversation with Dak. And ever since, they've been unstoppable. That's what needs to happen in Pittsburgh. It doesn't need to be made public, but I get his frustration. If I'm that good and I'm not getting the football, I get that. I really do. I don't listen. We sometimes there's this false narrative. Oh, all the athletes care about is the money. You know, George Pickens is like, dog, give me the football. Let me make plays. I love that. Like that's why I hated all the criticism Des Bryant got back in the day. Did some of it go too far? Sure, but at the heart of it was, guys, I want to win. Give me the football. I'm your best receiver. Give me the ball. And up until Des exited his prime, it usually worked. That's how I feel about George Pickens. Get him the football. But I think Pittsburgh, who plays Green Bay next week, my sister's a Packers fan. We may have a little bet on that. I don't know. I'm saying it right now on the show. We may have a tiny, tiny little bet on that. But that's not here nor there. Might need to. By the way, Pittsburgh, a 3-point favorite in that game. Isn't that something? They're saying the Packers and Steelers are, man, I may have enough Ira Betman game right there. I know it's not Friday yet, but I may already have my game there. I had Bryce's bleak bet. Upset the weekend.
Ira Betman.
Ira Betman. Probably taking the Steelers -3 if it doesn't move beyond that. But, yeah. The morning game, though. Miami Dolphins, Kansas City Chiefs in Germany. But they were singing John Denver, having a good time. Seemed like a fun place to go watch an NFL game overseas. I'm not going to lie to you. But Kansas City won the game 21-14 over the Miami Dolphins. And Tua Tagovailoa struggled for Miami. Again, a little bit more Miami later in terms of kind of where they're at as a team. But Patrick Mahomes, solid day. He did have a pass rating over 100, 2 touchdowns, but did have a pretty costly fumble that ended up giving the Dolphins 7 points and got them back in the game in the second half. But Kansas City. So I know there's a lot of concern for the Chiefs in terms of their offensive struggles and what they're not able to do right now in terms of their ability to take shots down the field, for Mahomes to really spread the ball around to guys other than Kelsey. And by the way, Vic Fangio, one of the smartest defensive coordinators in the league, said, okay, you can pay Patrick, you're the best quarterback in the league. You can have anybody else except for 87. Travis Kelce is not beating us today. And you saw that yesterday if you look at Travis Kelce's stat line. And by the way, folks, it's not because Taylor Swift wasn't there, okay? I know his numbers are better when Taylor's there. And there is, psychologically speaking, I get the whole sort of added motivation of kind of wanting to impress your significant other. Like, I get that. But Travis is the best tight end ever. So that was the factor. But Travis yesterday, 3 catches, 14 yards. Vic Fangio straight up said, one of the smarter defensive coordinators said, you can't have him. You can have Rashee Rice. You can have Sky Moore. You can have any of these guys. Justin Watson, you can have any of these guys. Can't have 87. And that's kind of what you saw yesterday. I mean, Mahomes threw the ball around. Multiple guys caught passes. But I think there is, if you're a Chiefs fan, and I'm not saying you should be in the dumps if you're a Chiefs fan. You're 7-2. You have the best record in the conference. And for the record, might have the best defense in the conference, not named Baltimore. More on the Ravens later. Because Kansas City today, don't know if anybody knew this, second in the NFL in scoring defense. Like that's Kansas, like in the Mahomes era, I never thought I'd be saying, yeah, the Chiefs are top 2 in the league in scoring defense. Never thought I'd say that. Here we are. Brett Veach, Chiefs front office, invested a lot into the secondary. McDuffie has been amazing for them. They've drafted some other guys who made plays. Nick Bolton, who's unfortunately out right now due to a wrist injury, but they poured in the defensive side of the ball. We assume, you know what assuming does sometimes, but we assume they're going to pay Chris Jones at some point after the season is over, if he's able to kind of get back on track and be the player that he's fully capable of being. But if I'm a Kansas City fan, I actually think you can draw back on a very similar stretch 2 years ago. Kansas City Chiefs. You remember when they lost to the Tennessee Titans in Week 7 of 2021. And I know everybody's going to say, well, they lost the AFC Championship game. Well, first of all, that's not exactly a bad season. We just hold the Chiefs to a very high standard because they're the dynasty of the league now. But in November, just 2 years ago, you know, Patrick Mahomes, he's turned the ball over a little bit. He had a turnover yesterday. Mahomes is top 5 in the NFL in interceptions. But they lost that game to Tennessee. And then they entered November. And they put together, save for one game, a 5-game stretch of okay football. I mean, they won all 5 games, but they didn't look great in them. They beat the Giants, the Daniel Jones-led Giants, and God bless Daniel Jones, tore his ACL yesterday, but Daniel Jones isn't a very good quarterback. They barely beat him on Monday Night Football on November 1st in Week 8. And then they beat the Jordan Love-led Packers. And by the way, this is rookie Jordan Love, not even the Jordan Love we see now. Rookie Jordan Love, 13-7, didn't look good offensively. Then they smoked the Raiders 41-14. Does that not remind you of that game against the Chargers? Where they beat the LA Chargers, who division rival, badly. The offense looked great. Very similar. Then they beat Dallas, but they scored 19 points at home. Then they beat Denver, and they barely broke 20. And then they broke through. They scored 34 on the Chargers, 36 on the Steelers, 31 on Cincinnati, 28 on Denver, and in the playoffs, 42 on Pittsburgh, 42 on Buffalo, and despite a loss, 24 against Cincinnati. Right now, what I think Andy Reid and Mahomes, where they're at is, okay, the front office did not make a deal for a receiver at the deadline, which for the record, I said they should have. We're not going to do hindsight today. I said they should have went out and got a guy. But the optimistic Chiefs fan could say, well, I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster was our number 1 last year. How's he doing in New England? I mean, I like Juju. He's a cool dude, good player, but you know, he's not doing much in Foxborough. He's doing a lot in Kansas City. Made him work. Who's to say we can't make Rashee Rice work and Sky Moore work and Justin Watson work? Who's to say we can't? Now, somebody could say, Bryson, they had Tyreek Hill 2 years ago. True, but Tyreek Hill didn't look terribly impactful yesterday. And for the record, I think Tyreek's the best receiver in football, but if there's anything about this Kansas City defense, and I remember saying this way back in Week 2 when they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know if did they break 20 in that game? Let me check. If they broke 20, it was barely against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was way back in Week 2, first win of the season. No, they didn't. They won 17-9. And the offense didn't look great. And I said, if I'm a Chiefs fan, I feel amazing today. Because if the concern is the offense, oh, we're in good shape, man. Because as I'm in the knock on Kansas City and some of those playoff losses, God, Mahomes played amazing. Defense can't stop a nosebleed. Not the case now. Top 2 in scoring defense. By the way, they're not playing bum offenses, and they held the Miami Dolphins, who have a 70-point game on their resume. In Miami, by the way, in their last game, scored 31 of New England. 2 weeks before that, scored 42 in Carolina. They could put up points, albeit against downtrodden teams, but they could put up points. Kansas City held them to 14. I'm just saying. I mean, these are held Justin Herbert and the Chargers. I mean, did LA break 20? I think they did. If it was, no, they held them to 17. Held Justin Herbert to 17 points. Holmes, Reed, Kelsey. It's what I say about organizations, and it kind of goes to, it's very similar to what Alabama's doing right now in college football, that despite deficiencies, smart people somehow, some way find a way to get it done. That's kind of how I feel about the Chiefs right now. I was watching that game, and it's like, well, it wasn't pretty. Offense only scored 14 points. 7 of their 21 came on an incredible fumble lateral play in the first half. But they had a stretch like this 2 years ago, and they were a win away from the Super Bowl. Just say they can't do it again. I know Kansas City, Tom Brady did something very similar to this. Remember, Tom had some statistically unimpressive games back in 2018. I mean, it was Julian Edelman, an older Gronk, and then a bunch of guys. I mean, they had Josh Gordon for a time before he had to take his leave of absence due to some substance abuse problems. But New England's receiving core wasn't very good. I think they had Sony Michel at running back. I mean, it was a bunch of guys, a bunch of Jags, as Bill Parcells would say. A lot of guys you could say that about in Kansas City, not named Mahomes and Kelsey, offensively at least. But I think the Chiefs feel pretty good about themselves. As for Miami, briefly, so I'm not going to retract what I said about Tua. I made this big apology to Tua and his fans, and I promise to stop calling them Tua-anon. And the Dolphins fans, because Miami is an awesome city and the Dolphins have a great fan base, they could not have been more gracious. And listen, I've always spoken highly of people from Miami. I've always praised the Heat organization. No, I know some people in Miami. They're great. They're great. They were a good sport about it. But they are my buddy Philip yesterday was comparing them to. We talk often during games. He said they remind me of him of the Vikings last year, where the Vikings, they beat the bad teams and got blown out against the good teams. In fairness to Miami, I think they're better than last year's Minnesota team in that the bad teams, they smoke by a lot. Minnesota barely survived against bad teams overwhelmingly. But I do think we need to kind of come to terms with what they are, where I thought early in the season they were running the football very effectively with Raheem Mostert. The O-line looked good. Now, O-line's dealt with some injuries. Maybe teams have figured them out in that regard. By the way, remember last year, Miami's offense was humming. They were clicking. And then they played that San Francisco team. And then they played the Chargers with virtually no starters in the secondary LA didn't have in that game. They jammed Tyreek. They jammed Waddle at the line of scrimmage. Be physical with these guys. And I thought that Eagles loss 2 weeks ago for Miami would be the best thing that happened to them, where kind of a finesse team gets beat up, gets hit in the mouth by a very physical Eagles team. Thus far, and it's only been 2 weeks, so maybe it's hard. When you've established who you are, it's kind of hard to course correct. But it kind of looked very similar, did it not? Where Miami's defense kind of is what kept them in the game, particularly in the second half. Tua made some nice throws, but there are, and I've always said this, even when I made the apology about Tua and that he is a franchise quarterback, there are still limitations. He is barely 6 feet tall. The arm is better than I thought, but not special. He's not great. Some of this, I think, is the injuries. He's not great in moving in and out of the pocket. Like, there are some limitations with Tua that are a fair criticism to bring up. But is it fair to say that as good as Miami's offense is, there is kind of a way to figure them out? And whether that's an indictment on the quarterback, the coach, or the scheme, or a combination of the three, listen, I think Miami's still going to make the playoffs. I still think barring the unforeseen thing of Aaron Rodgers coming back, and not only coming back looking like prime Aaron Rodgers, which if he does come back, he won't look like that, surely to goodness, coming off an Achilles. Frankly, I didn't think he was going to be awesome this year. I think he'd be good enough to win the division. But I still think Miami's going to end up winning the division because I don't trust Buffalo whatsoever. New England's terrible. And the Jets are talented, but don't get great quarterback play on a week-to-week basis. That said, though, I've never believed the Bills were going to make the playoffs ever before the season. Said they were going to miss it. Definitely maintain that today. I still think Miami's getting in, but it's not going to be easy sledding. You look at Miami's schedule from here. They play the Raiders, who, and all of a sudden, very physical team. Miami struggles against those. Jets, physical team. Commanders, somewhat physical, but Dolphins should win that. Titans, not that good, really physical. Jets, physical. Dallas, physical. Baltimore, really physical. Buffalo, physical. We saw Buffalo did to them as many flaws as Buffalo had. We saw what the Bills did to them back in week 4. Like that's you kind of beat Miami by they're the kid that's there's Miami's sort of like the bully that goes around the block talking about how big and bad they are, and then the real bully, so to speak, shows up and kicks their arse in the backyard. Like that's kind of where you're at with the Dolphins. They're a playoff team, not great though. Nick Keating, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Nick Keating's in the comments says the Bengals defense can slow Mahomes. Well, we've seen them do it before, particularly in that AFC title game 2 years ago. And I know there's the whole Mahomes is 1-3 against the Chiefs. I don't have his numbers right next to me, but in most of those games, I should say most of those losses, save for the AFC title game loss 2 years ago, Mahomes has played pretty darn well against Cincinnati's defense. Now, hasn't had Tyreek or had Tyreek in some of those, hasn't in others, but I do think Kansas City's going to be fine offensively. If the concern for the Chiefs is offense, then smartest offensive coach, best quarterback. By the way, they've already got the best tight end. They should be fine in that regard. Really looking forward to Bryson's Best 10 on Wednesday. I'll tell you that. So I do Bryson's Best 10 every Wednesday, end of the show. So around my show starts at 6 Eastern. So a little after 7:15 at the very latest, I do a segment called Bryce's Best 10 where I list the best 10 teams in the NFL. And last week there was a lot of turbulence, a lot of team. I mean, this is going to be the second spoiler alert for Bryce's Best 10. This is going to be the first time in like a month, 2 months where I've had the same team at number one back to back. And that wasn't the case for a few weeks because I had Detroit number one at one point. I had not Baltimore, San Francisco number one for a while before they went on their losing streak. So as we're into November now, Thanksgiving's approaching, then you get to December football. As time goes on, we slowly kind of start to see who's real and who's not. And that makes Bryce's Best 10 all the easier. It really does. It's just which contender is better than the other contender, honestly. And then the bottom of Bryce's Best 10, like good playoff teams. Here's who else I want to get into. Because we got to give this man some props. CJ Stroud was, I don't even think amazing begins to describe how he was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday. So CJ Stroud threw for 470 yards against Tampa Bay, which is the most ever. It's the record for passing yards for any rookie quarterback in NFL history. Threw for 470 yards, 5 touchdowns, including, by the way, a game-winning drive. Again, trying to pull this up here on my notes, but led a game-winning drive. So Baker Mayfield, who's played pretty well this season, led a drive, gave the Bucs the lead, under a minute to go. For some reason, my notes will not pull up today, guys. I don't know what's going on. Wi-Fi's good. But under a minute left, CJ Stroud leads the Houston Texans to a game-winning drive. By the way, they needed a touchdown to win. This wasn't like field goal wins that you only need to go so far to get your kicker within range. No. Okay, here, I've got it here. Now, finally. CJ Stroud got the ball back. 46 seconds left. Had to go 75 yards. And did it in 40 seconds. Now, Houston's receiving core, I've always said it's better than it gets credit for. But my man Dak Prescott had Noah Brown last year, made Noah Brown competent at times. But remember, Cowboys fans, you'll probably remember this. But remember he had that touchdown, or not touchdown, the throw to Noah Brown in that overtime game against Jacksonville with a perfect throw, but the ball goes right through Noah Brown's hands, gets recovered for a touchdown. It's like, it always goes this way for Dak, doesn't it? But Noah Brown is not that good. He might be the number one receiver in New England. He's not great. Man's with CJ Stroud. Not saying CJ Stroud's better than Dak yet, but 6 catches for $53. Tank Dell, and I like Tank Dell a lot. 6 catches, 114. Dalton Schultz, 10 catches, $130. That's what CJ Stroud's doing. By the way, with no running game. Texans only went for 3 yards of carry. Doing this too with no kicker. Kicker got hurt early in the game, or it might have been in warmups. And Houston rest of the game. And one of their kicks, they had to rely on a running back to make a kick, which ended up being huge. It was a field goal, so 3 points, obviously, which ended up being huge because Houston won by 2. So props to Houston Texans, man. They deserve this one. CJ Stroud deserves this one. And CJ Stroud's a top 10 quarterback. Like, let's not postpone this. Well, he's just a rookie. He's a top 10 quarterback. Again, in no particular order, and I have my top 10 before the season. Obviously, that changes as we go through the season. But in no particular order, only guys I'm taking. Only guys I'm absolutely today to win the Super Bowl, I'm in the Super Bowl today, taking over CJ Stroud. Mahomes, Burrow, Lawrence, Allen, Herbert, Lamar, Hurts, Dak. I might be missing something. I mean, Rodgers is hurt. Carr, I really like. Geno, I like. Purdy, I really like. Tua, I've grown to like. They're not as good as CJ Stroud. I mean, Offensive Rookie of the Year has been kind of up in discussion. Zay Flowers has had a great season for Baltimore. He was my pick before the year. You've got, what's his name? Puka Nacua in Los Angeles having a tremendous season for the Rams. This guy, I mean, you look at his numbers this season, folks. This is as a rookie. And I get that the supporting cast around him actually isn't terrible. I think it's better than we give it credit for. But this guy, we worried about did he take the Wonderlic test and didn't test well? It's like, okay, that doesn't matter. Okay, is he accurate? Is he a good decision maker? Is he coachable? Does he have size? Yes. CJ Stroud, 2,200 yards and has a 14-1 touchdown to interception ratio. 14-1. That is ridiculous. And it isn't like the Texans are treating him like this game manager. Don't make mistakes. Like Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay, don't make a mistake, Jimmy. Don't throw the ball to the other team. No. CJ, let it rip. Like that is rare for a team to turn a quarterback loose, so to speak, to turn a rookie quarterback loose. And he looks like a top 10 guy because he is a top 10 guy. Listen, I know the sentiment today, and I get it. I get it. I know the sentiment today in Carolina is, man, they screwed up drafting Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. Again, I was one of those who said that. I liked Stroud more as a prospect. I liked his upside more than Bryce. In Bryce's defense, what the heck does he have around him in Carolina? He's got nothing at receiver, offensive line. So I'll defend Bryce in that regard. He's got nothing in Carolina. Roles reversed. Bryce would be better in Houston. Stroud wouldn't be as good in Carolina. That said, I think Stroud would be better. I think we got to give Bryce let's give him more than a half season before we determine Bryce Young is terrible. Okay, like let's give the kid some time. Let's put some pieces around him. But that said, the Texans found their guy. They thought they did with Deshaun Watson, and then the legal stuff and the trade requests and off the field disturbing things. So that blew up. Then they tried Davis Mills, who I kind of liked out of Stanford. That didn't work. There were some limitations there. This kid steps in. I mean, the first time I saw CJ Stroud really was when he played my Steelers in week 4, and I was like, golly, Pittsburgh has a really good defense, and he is tearing us up. This kid is special. And by the way, how about the NFC South today? So Trevor is established. We know how good Trevor is. Looks like CJ. I mean, I've already got CJ as a top 10 guy. CJ looks like he's going to be, if he isn't already, special. In the glimpses we saw from Anthony Richardson, he looks really good, assuming he stays healthy. And it's a little bite-size, little sample size in Tennessee, and I still have some questions. But if this continues, Will Levis in Tennessee has played well. So all of a sudden, maybe the worst quarterback division in the league might end up being one of the best when it's all said and done, because the teams have potentially, Houston definitely has drafted the right guy. So is Jacksonville. Indianapolis, we got to see more from Richardson. He's barely played. The same could be said about Levis in Tennessee. But if they all pan out, man, that ends up being a really well-quarterback division. By the way, a well-coached division. Doug Peterson's a Super Bowl champion. DeMeco Ryans, we see what he's doing this year, doing a spectacular job. I think he's in the Coach of the Year discussion, to be completely honest with you, given what he took over in Houston. You've got Shane Steichen, who I think I really like Shane Steichen in Indianapolis. Thought he did a great job in Philly. And Mike Vrabel, we know how great of a head coach he is. And Mike Vrabel's had some pretty mid teams, so to speak, and has had them on the cusp of the playoffs and sometimes gotten them into the playoffs multiple times with average to below average quarterback play. So I wanted to say all that about CJ Stroud. This is leading to a bigger point, I promise. I want to say all about CJ Stroud because I love the kid. By the way, leadership. I mean, his press conferences, go watch them. They're great. I mean, he is so easy to root for, and on the field, he's so dynamic. But I did want to say that to make a bigger point. We had some great quarterback play around the league today. I think the third best quarterback of the day was Dak Prescott. And the second best quarterback of the day was CJ Stroud. Both were spectacular. CJ, of course, in a W. However, the best quarterback game, and I'm going to borrow a term and a phrase and a shout that I often use for one of the quarterbacks I just mentioned. CJ Stroud, Dak Prescott, take your guess as to who that is. Their full government name. And I was thinking about this, and now that I think about it, I should probably use it on another guy. Because like Dak, I believed in him since college. Like Dak, he was a 4th-round pick. Like Dak, well, this isn't similar to Dak. Dak hasn't bounced around the league. Dallas has stuck with him for 8 years. This guy's went from team to team to team. Say it with me. And if you don't know it, that's okay because it's my first time doing it. But by next week, learn this the way that he's learning his wide receivers' names this week. Robert Joshua Dobbs. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, listen, I knew Josh was good. And I said after Arizona beat Dallas in week 3, I said, that's a starting quarterback. I said, you cannot tell me there are 32 guys better than Joshua Dobbs. I don't know if I can properly put into context what he did yesterday in Atlanta. By the way, he's a Georgia kid. He's from Alpharetta, Georgia. So it's fitting that this big moment came in Atlanta. Atlanta, to my knowledge, is about an hour away from Alpharetta. But Joshua Dobbs was traded from the Arizona Cardinals to the Minnesota Vikings on Halloween. That was last Tuesday. Kirk Cousins, as we know, sadly tore his Achilles and is done for the season. So the Vikings this week were like, okay, you know what? We're going to go out. We're going to get a starting quarterback, which Joshua Dobbs very clearly is. Again, the kid had nothing. He's not really a kid anymore. He's almost 30. But he had nothing to work with in Arizona. It's the worst team in the league. Can only do so much, but it showed flashes, showed promise. So Minnesota said, you know what? We got too good of a team to miss the playoffs. We're not going to tank. Yeah, Kirk Cousins is gone. Yeah, the guy we get to replace him probably won't be as good, but let's get a starting quarterback. But after we make the move, let's give him time, understand the playbook, and we'll start the rookie. We'll start Jaron Hall, kid out of BYU, give him an opportunity. And sadly, and this sucks, Jaron Hall gets concussed first quarter at the goal line. It's just a terrible, terrible break for the kid. It's like his really first big opportunity in the league, and it has to leave due to injury, which just sucks. But Joshua Dobbs, again, Joshua Dobbs does not know all of his teammates' names. This has been confirmed by reports, by the way. Joshua Dobbs had never taken a snap behind the Vikings center. Joshua Dobbs had not thrown a pass to any of Minnesota's receivers or tight ends. Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, take your pick. Threw for 158 yards, ran for 66, 2 touchdowns through the air, a touchdown on the ground, a QBR 0-100 of 86, and a passer rating of 101. And at the end of the day, when it was all said and done, led a game-winning drive for a team that signed him 5 days ago. 5 days before game day, he's winning games for the Minnesota Vikings. And you consider, ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Dobbs has been on 5 teams in the last year and a half. He was in Pittsburgh, which, God, I wish we had him over Kenny Pickett. I like Kenny, but dang, I wish we still had Dobbs. He was with the Cleveland Browns, had a cup of coffee in Detroit, went to Tennessee. Remember, Joshua Dobbs was starting games at the end of the year for the Titans, trying to get in the playoffs. Then he came back to Cleveland, who traded him to Arizona, who traded him to Minnesota. I said when the Vikings made this move last week, I said now that they made this move for Dobbs, they're a playoff team. Because they were 4-4, but they lost their starting quarterback for the year. They're a playoff team. And dare I say it, they will be, due to the fact that they'll be a playoff team, and due to the fact that in all likelihood, barring unforeseen circumstances, Kirk Cousins probably is going to leave Minnesota at season's end. He'll have plenty of suitors. Kirk's a good quarterback. Kirk's a top 12, 13 quarterback in the league. He'll have plenty of suitors. But let's say Dobbs gets Minnesota in. And for the record, Minnesota's got a pretty good football team. I mean, you look at their defense is, to me, it's been really impressive. So they gave up 28 yesterday. Not great to Taylor Heineke. But in fairness, Atlanta has plenty of weapons on that side of the ball, and Taylor Heineke is a better option than Desmond Ridder. That said, after Minnesota gave up 27 to the Kansas City Chiefs, and this was back in week 5, they were 1-4 in their 4-game winning streak since. They've given up 13 to the Bears. It's like, okay, it's the Bears. 17 to the 49ers, 10 to the Packers, now 28 yesterday to Atlanta. But again, Atlanta does have playmakers. And by the way, 2 of those points came on a Josh Dobbs safety, and they got a field goal after that on a Josh Dobbs fumble. Josh got off to a rough start. I watched this game start to finish. He got sacked for a safety early on, then had a fumble after that, and still rebounded and accounted for 3 touchdowns. This is the equivalent. I'm a college student. Maybe some of the listeners are a college student or went to college, or it's just we all have experience with tests. High school, middle school, elementary school. We've all taken tests. This would be like, I heard Kevin O'Connell say this yesterday. It's such a good analogy. This would be like if you were studying for a Spanish test and got there and it's like, yeah, psych, it's a French test, and acing it. That's what Josh Dobbs just did yesterday. I highly doubt Josh knew he was going to play on Sunday. Jaren Hall probably, and again, Jaren Hall had a decent, tiny little stint there for the Vikings. Playing okay. Nice rookie quarterback before he got hurt. I'd say Jaren Hall probably, because he knew he was going to be the starter the second Kirk Cousins went down. Jaren Hall probably had a pretty good week of practice. They bring Dobbs in. Again, there's a reason he didn't throw to these receivers. They didn't think he was going to play. They dressed him in an emergency situation, which it clearly was, and he rose to the occasion. By the way, against an Atlanta Falcons defense that ranks 6th in the NFL. I mean, it is one of the most impressive quarterback performances I've ever seen in my life. As great as Dak was yesterday against bad circumstances, as great as CJ Stroud was yesterday, probably the greatest game we've ever seen a rookie quarterback play. This is on a different level. Josh Dobbs is clearly a starting quarterback, and again, if Minnesota gets in, which I think they will, they're in the playoffs today. If the playoff season ended today, Minnesota's in. With Justin Jefferson, with Jordan Addison, with TJ Hawkinson, with a solid offensive line and an improving defense, let's say Minnesota shocks. We think about the contenders in the NFC. San Francisco, Philly, Dallas, Detroit. Let's say Minnesota shocks somebody. Let's say they go on the road and stun the 49ers. Or they stun the division rival Lions. There's divisional familiarity there. All of a sudden, you got to start having some conversations in Minnesota like, timeout. This guy, multiple times, has been signed or traded for within a month, or in this case, within a week of him playing. And has played well. But then again, is it all that surprising given the fact that he's a aerospace engineer major? He's literally a rocket scientist. By the way, NASA came up. Was it NASA? Somebody came up with a nickname for Josh Dobbs. So I call him Space Dobbs because he is an aerospace engineer and he makes plays from outer space. Where is the nickname? I saw this earlier today on my phone. Okay. So NASA's Glenn Research Center, their Twitter account said, this is what they said, because Josh Dobbs visited them apparently during the offseason. Here's what they said, okay? Congratulations at Josh Dobbs on yesterday's big win. Looks like you rocketed on and off the field. Nice little pun there. We heard you even got a new nickname. The Pastronaut. If the suit fits, wear it. That is great. I'm still going to call him Space Dobbs. I'm still, when he plays well, going to give him the Robert Joshua Dobbs. Man, listen, good for him. He's a great kid. Obviously, he might be the smartest quarterback in the league. I'm not talking about like at the line of scrimmage, all that, which he's obviously good with that. He played after getting signed by the team 5 days ago. He might be away from football the smartest quarterback, one of the smartest quarterbacks ever. Hats off. Hats off. Literally. Hats off. Literally. My hat is off of my head for the podcast audience. Joshua Dobbs. Unbelievable. Comment here from Patrick. CJ Stroud over Bryce Young. CJ has looked better. Better and better. He's my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Texans made the right pick and haven't looked back. Yes, I think, again, to go back to my original point, I do think CJ is better than Bryce. I said that before the draft. Again, though, and look, there are some limitations to Bryce. He's 5'9", and looks a $180 soaking wet. But look, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure what quarterback could work with what they have in Carolina. I mean, it's bad. It's like Patriots bad. Might be even worse. By the way, you see where Mac Jones threw that game-ending interception? That was, again, I'm not the type of person who roots against people, but Mac Jones is a pretty easy guy to root against, given his history of dirty plays, given the fact that you saw it yesterday. He's cussing out coaches. He's cussing out players, despite the fact I'm like, Mac, you're not playing that well. Mac Jones, by the way, gets the Commanders in a 20-17 loss to the Commanders, who traded their two best players, and the Patriots were the favorites in this game. Mac Jones had a QBR of 29, a passer rating of 66, and barely completed over 50% of his passes, and threw the game-ending interception, despite getting over 100 rushing yards from his running backs. Sorry, I just had to emphasize that. By the way, Washington, and this is sort of our recap of the other games around the NFL. Washington still in the mix to be a wild card team. The Minnesota win rather didn't help Washington's case, but they should be fine. They're a solid football team. I like what I'm seeing from Sam Howell. If there's one word, I've said this in the past, there's one word I can use to describe Sam Howell, it's warrior. Kid fights, man. Kid competes. You see it from week in and week out. Regardless of circumstances, man, he plays hard, puts out pretty good, results. Now, I think the ultimate warrior quarterback is Dak. I mean, this guy just keeps coming. Whatever the circumstances are, man, he's Micah Parsons said it after the game, but Sam Howell put in a similar discussion. Not as good as Dak, of course, but the same kind of mindset. What other games we have? Ravens. Oh, my gosh. So I thought Baltimore was a contender for the season. And I knew Lamar Jackson would be great this year, given the fact that he got a significant upgrade at OC. He got Odell Beckham Jr., who caught his first touchdown of the season yesterday. They drafted Zay Flowers, who I loved out of Boston College. They had Mark Andrews, good running game, good O-line. Lamar was great. The Ravens' offense was great. He scored 37 points. This Baltimore defense is, leading the league in scoring defense, but even more impressive than that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages and the whole audience. The Seattle Seahawks had 6 first downs. They had 6 first downs. Last time the Baltimore Ravens were first in the NFL in overall defense, they had, to me, the best defense ever, the 2000 Ravens defense, led by the great Ray Lewis. Now, this defense is not that defense. I don't think this defense by season's end is going to be considered the best ever. But, I don't know how we beat them. I don't know how the Steelers beat them. I really don't. I'm glad we did because we're second in the division and we're the first wild card team somehow. Man, again, listen, Geno's not the long-term answer for Seattle. I think we've always believed that. I've always liked Geno. Geno's we saw last year, and we've seen spurts this year as a starting quarterback, but he's had a little bit of the turnover bug. I think he's had 6 turnovers in the last 3 weeks, so that's going to be something he cleans up. And I think Seattle's still a playoff team, but you saw the difference in playoff team and best team in the league. I'm not sure what Baltimore's weakness is. Their secondary is elite, pass rush and linebacking core, front 7 in totality is elite. They got a great coach, great quarterback, great O-line, a great receiving core, great tight end, a greatest kicker ever. What is there not to like for Baltimore? There he is. There's Patrick. There you go, Patrick. Whack Daddy Jones. Yes. All that needs to be said. I stand on it. Nothing anyone can say to change my mind. Well, listen, I don't think anybody at this point, anybody who watches the game, Patrick, is trying to change your mind or my mind or anybody that actually watches the games. Again, I do not revel in others failing, but Mac Jones is... Mac Jones isn't everybody. That goes without saying. Okay, quickly on this one, Browns dominated the Cardinals 27. Another thing, I actually took Arizona to cover stupidly because I'm like, hey, Cleveland doesn't have film on the rookie quarterback. Cleveland is Deshaun Watson's back. I don't know if that's a great thing. And Deshaun was okay. He had a QBR 41, but did have a couple touchdown passes. One was a very lucky pass to Amari Cooper. Cooper made a great play, but the ball got tipped. But Cleveland, just like everybody else, the AFC North, 2 games over 500 in the division, and the Cardinals, it would appear, no longer have fire in their guts. As Jonathan Gannon, their head coach, detailed before the season. I picked the Cardinals win 1 game before the season, and it looks like that win against Dallas with Robert Joshua Dobbs at quarterback was all they had in the tank. So Caleb Williams looks like he's going to be either a Cardinal or a Giant. One of the two. Or a Bear. Who else do we have? So I mentioned the Texans. Speaking of the Bears, again, listen, Chicago, you're better off losing than winning, okay? You're 2-7. You're a bad football team. Defense is bad. Offense is bad. Fields is hurt. Tyson Bagent is how you say his name, threw 3 picks against the Saints. Saints, by the way, back in first in the NFC South. Derek Carr played well. Ever since Derek Carr yelled at his receivers 2 games ago, feels like they've kind of got back on the same pace, same track. They played great offensively against Indianapolis, played very well yesterday against the Bears and took care of business. Didn't cover, which they had a missed field goal that just broke my heart. I took the Saints to cover, and they couldn't pull through for me. But Saints won. Listen, they're better than Chicago. And the Bears are in tank mode, and the Saints are whoever wins that NFC South, again, as I keep saying, tragically, will be a playoff team. And matter of fact, host a playoff game. But if there's one team I want to do it, it'd be the Saints, because I think they have a very good quarterback, an excellent roster, and a great home field advantage. So it won't feel like an automatic. Like if Atlanta gets in, Dallas or Philly will mop Atlanta. They'll probably mop the Saints, but I think it'll be a better matchup. Packers beat the Rams 20-3. Listen, Jordan Love didn't play that well again, but he was aided by his running game. Aaron Jones went for a touchdown. The Packers in general had 184 rushing yards. Look, it's their best opportunity to kind of mask Jordan Love, masquerade him in a sense, and keep him from turning into a pumpkin, so to speak, although I would argue he already has. But okay, you beat a team with Brett Rippon at quarterback at home. You know, congratulations. I'm not overly impressed. You're gonna get mopped next week by Pittsburgh. Colts beat the Panthers 27-13. I actually picked Carolina to win this game. As stupidly, I didn't take into account. Again, Carolina has nothing around Bryce Young. CJ, listen, and I want to emphasize this one more time. I've said since the beginning I thought CJ was the better prospect and would be the better quarterback. I don't think Bryce is a bum. I'm sorry. First of all, he's a rookie and he's 5'9", so there's limitations there. I mean, you got an old Adam Thielen, Steven Sullivan, Tommy Tremble, DJ Chark. I mean, guys, this is not a winning formula. It's not a winning group in the NFL. Colts are the better team. Gardner played okay. Colts did what they were supposed to do. Had 2 pick sixes against Bryce Young. But the Colts, 4-5, still in the mix potentially for a playoff spot. And finally, the Raiders dominating the Giants 30-6 with Antonio Pierce, interim head coach. And again, reportedly, and we know how owners can be sometimes, but reportedly, Mark Davis, shout out Mark Jones of ESPN, Mark Davis of the owner of the Vegas Raiders has said that he will give Antonio Pierce a legitimate chance given his, we'll see how the Raiders perform this season, the rest of the season rather, he'll give him a chance to be the head coach. And I hope that's the case. That this was my, if I were a bet man game, I'm like, this is an easy one. Interim head coach. I checked the numbers in the last decade. Interim head coaches have a winning record against the spread and in general. And so there's no reason to believe that a more talented Raiders team at home against a reeling Giants squad. Daniel Jones, again, the big story for the Giants. Daniel Jones tore his ACL. It is out for the season. I've always said, listen, the Giants made a massive mistake giving Daniel Jones the money they did. I've never been a huge fan of him. As I said, I didn't know 15 touchdown passes got you a $160 million contract. That said, I defended Daniel Jones a lot this year, more than I thought I would. Man was running for his life. I mean, what do you want him to do? This Giants O-line's terrible. It's one of the worst in football. Pro Football Focus has it right there. The advanced analytics and stats had the Giants at the bottom of the league. Daniel Jones was working with just about nothing. And so now the Giants are stuck with Tommy DeVito, who I think is a character from Goodfellas, if I'm not mistaken, who had a QBR. Tommy DeVito had a QBR of 3. It's times have been better for the New York Giants. Again, they are 16-point dogs. I think that's the biggest underdog we've had thus far this season. Dallas is a 16.5-point favorite against the Giants, and I'm not sure I wouldn't take them to cover in the first half. Giants are reeling. But as for the Raiders, and then we'll move on to my prediction for tonight's game, Chargers and Jets. That story, and given that came from Jay Glazer, I have no reason to believe it's not true. Jay Glazer is one of the premier insiders in football and frankly in sports. The story he told on Fox yesterday in the pregame show, when he said the sort of the breaking point for the Raiders was when they had a team meeting with Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels now former head coach of the Raiders, asked Antonio Pierce, at the time the linebackers coach, now interim coach, asked him to speak to the team. Antonio Pierce actually really fired up the team. But in his analogy, he said, look, when we beat the Patriots, because Pierce was a linebacker, was a Pro Bowler, by the way, in 06, but was a linebacker on the Giants team that shocked the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. Remember the Strahan team, and Eli was quarterback? They upset the Patriots, and Josh McDaniels, who was the OC of the Patriots at that time, didn't take too kindly to it and said, hey, don't bring up the Patriots. And he got fired. And Antonio Pierce is the guy. So, first of all, it turns out Josh McDaniels is Mr. Sensitive. If he couldn't take it wasn't even a joke. It was just an analogy that, you think you want the good for the Raiders, but I guess his heart is still in New England. I guess, listen, Belichick will probably bring him back next year. Third stint as the Patriots OC with, I don't know who's going to be quarterback, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, whoever the quarterback is. Every single day, it's just further confirmation. It was never the Patriots way. It was the Tom Brady way, which I've been saying that for darn near 3 years on this show, but actually almost 4 years. Ever since my show started, I've been saying that. Yikes. Raiders have a chance, though. They're 4-5. They are in the thick of the wild card hunt in the AFC. Again, we still got a whole 2 months left in the regular season, so Vegas has plenty of time. Now, again, they do play Kansas City, and Denver, who seems to be catching fire a little bit, and the Chargers, who I'll get into in just a moment. Before I predict that game, I did want to mention, so we did have a great college football weekend. Some fantastic games. Tennessee. I'm just kidding. That wasn't like a premier game in college football, but I did say, by the way, Tennessee would score 59, and they did. We scored 59. I said UConn scored 10. They only scored 3. Tennessee walloped UConn 59-3. But as far as the games that everybody was watching, Texas barely survived Kansas State in overtime. I didn't like that last play call at the end. Very conservative by Kansas State at the end. But Texas survived with their backup quarterback. Very impressive win by them. Clemson upset Notre Dame. Listen, I was ripping Dabo Swinney last week, but Dabo was talking about how, what was his comment? You should buy freaking stock into Clemson right now. I said, I'm like, Dabo, first of all, take some transfers in, embrace NIL, and get a better staff. You're 5-4. Well, chill, okay? I thought the standard was higher in Clemson than 5-4. Fighting to make a bowl game. Thought the standard was higher in Clemson. Maybe I was mistaken. At least thus far it is. You had, let's see, what was the other games? By the way, the game of the night, no doubt about it, was USC and Washington. Between, to me, the two best quarterbacks in all of college football. And to me, the first pick, Caleb Williams, and the second pick, Michael Penix Jr. Again, I've been a big Drake May guy for about a year now. I really like him. I think he's has all the potential in the world to be a franchise quarterback. Reminds me of Justin Herbert a lot. Not quite as big as Justin, but reminds me of him. So I think May's going to be really good. Penix is the second best quarterback in the country, and I'm not going to say it's not even close, but he's got the arm, the accuracy. Some of these throws that Penix is making out to the pocket are like, God, this guy is a robot. Lefty, I mean, he's so good. Getting to watch that game was like it was a quarterback masterclass. It just was. USC finally fired Alex Grinch as their DC. It's about time. They should have done that. Lincoln Riley should have done that back at Oklahoma. So the fact that he took him over, we felt weird. But Washington, who I think is going to be in the playoff this year, 52-42 over USC. But real quick, I did want to touch on this real quick. So Alabama beat LSU, which LSU was my preseason pick to win the SEC West and to potentially fight for a playoff spot. And obviously they have 3 losses, so that's completely out of the question now, out of the picture now. But I was thinking about Nick Saban. I was thinking about Alabama. And I made the same mistake with Alabama that everybody did with my Golden State Warriors 2 years ago. Golden State's old. Golden State's prime has passed them. There's other teams that are better. And Golden State won the championship. Why? Because they know how to win. Veteran leadership, great coaching, great culture. Forgive me, Alabama. And I don't like Alabama fans. I want to make that abundant. I got a buddy who's an Alabama fan. I like him. Everybody else, heck with them. But the Alabama culture, Nick Saban, always respected it. Always respected it. It's about the details. He's Belichick. Saban and his close friend Belichick. Nick Saban is Bill Belichick, but he's adjusted to the modern times. He's embraced the quarterback position. He's embraced offense. He's embraced NIL and the transfer portal. And because of that, because Nick Saban's the GOAT coach, what a shock. Alabama's right back in the thick of things. I kind of danced on this team and this program's grade before the season. Maybe that's the Tennessee fan in me. I thought Texas would beat them, which they did. And I'm like, okay, Bama, pack them up. Let's just see if they can get a good bowl game. And all of a sudden, Georgia, and I know they beat Alabama last time they played. They beat them in the national title game 2 years ago. I get that. But Georgia's last loss came to Alabama in the SEC title game. And it looks like, and I'm hoping against hope, somehow, some way, Ole Miss and our former Tennessee coach Lane Kiffin can pull off the upset over Georgia so that we can maybe beat Missouri and somehow beat Georgia to get to Atlanta ourselves. But I also got to be realistic. Georgia's the second best team in the country. I think Michigan's the best. Georgia's probably going to win the SEC East, regardless of the outcome of the SEC title game, make the playoff. That said, Kirby Smart, Georgia, who hasn't played their best football, played okay against Missouri, they got to be looking over their shoulder like, God, I thought we didn't have to worry about them anymore. Jalen Milroe's fine. He's gotten better every week, to his credit, which again is a credit to him. It's a credit to the coaching in Alabama. But it's like, it's the constant Saban. New defensive coordinators, new offensive coordinators, new quarterbacks, new players, new age in college football, and he's still there. He's still there. So I listen, I don't like Alabama as a Tennessee fan. I never will. I can't stand Bama fans. I have nothing but love and respect for this man, what he's done. I'm just watching that. I'm watching the second half in particular because that was an entertaining first half. Jaden. I keep calling him Jalen. Jaden Daniels at LSU put on a masterclass in terms of passing the football, running the football, took some big hits in that game, has all season. But it's tight. It's tight at halftime, and I'm like, okay, it's feeling good about this. And then Bama blows it open in the second half. It's like, that's Alabama being Alabama. That's you can't get rid of them. Like, I've resigned to the fact this Bama dynasty isn't over until that guy retires. It's just not. It's the same thing in Golden State. That dynasty ain't over until Steph's out of his prime. That's nothing but, I sometimes you have these moments where you watch greatness like, I can't do anything but respect this. I can't do anything but respect it. By the way, Bama's got Kentucky, Chattanooga, Auburn to end the season. They're going to go 11-1, go into the SEC title game with a chance to get in the playoff. And the playoff race is tight, but as I always say, it always kind of tends to work itself out by season's end. Maybe there's a discussion about a debate about who should be between the fourth best team, fifth best team. It usually works itself out. One of these teams is going to lose a critical game before the season's over. We know for a fact Ohio State or Michigan are going to lose a game at some point because they play each other. Again, second time I've done this, but hats off to Alabama. Like, nothing but respect for this program. Wow. So my Warriors are beating the Pistons. Entering the second quarter, Warriors are up 31-26 on Detroit. So that's good. My gosh, Steph has 16 after the first quarter? Lord have mercy, Steph. Worst case scenario, second best player on earth. That's what he does. Patrick Brown, my Seminoles in the rearview mirror of Georgia and Michigan. Ohio State, I'm ready for rivalry week, Thanksgiving weekend. Who does? Florida State, you're right, Patrick, is right in the midst of the playoff race. Who does Florida? Because Florida State's had some games here. I think, there's no offense, Patrick, honestly, but I think Florida State's going to drop one of these games sooner rather than later. They've got Miami. They'll probably beat Miami. Although Miami's solid. They'll beat North Alabama, obviously. Florida, It's in the swamp, and take this from a Vols fan. That is not an easy place to go play, which Florida State fans know too. I mean, they play them every year. They play in the swamp every other year. I don't know. My playoff teams, then I promise I'll get into Jets and Chargers. My playoff teams today, in no particular order, who I think it's going to be by season's end: Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State, Washington. I would love nothing more than to see Matthew McConaughey at a college football playoff game. I love McConaughey. All right. Here we go. But I know Texas, and Texas is they're UT. They're the middle of the country UT, just like Tennessee is. Tennessee's the UT of the South. Texas is the UT is sort of the middle of the country there. I feel like they're going to drop one of these games. Remember Tennessee, and trust me, y'all remind me. Tennessee is, I think, 9-1. They're playing at South Carolina. They're big favorites. South Carolina can't do anything, and they smoked us and ended our playoff hopes, and our quarterback went down for the year. Now, obviously, I hope that's not the case for any of Texas quarterbacks, but I feel like there'll be somebody catches them off guard, and Texas blows it at the end. I don't know. I have a feeling that that's going to happen. Patrick, we've won some close games. Miami's the big game for me. I dislike the Canes much as I do Philly. I understand that. In-state rivalry, ACC rivalry, I get that. Hate them as much as they do Philly. That is hate, Patrick, but I get it. Right? Rivalry week, rivalries in college football, man, they run centuries deep. You just don't get rid of those. You don't get rid of those. By the way, Oklahoma State won the last Bedlam yesterday. All right, college football talk aside, what a show we've had today. A lot of stuff. But I got a big game tonight. AFC matchup between two teams competing for an AFC wildcard spot. You got the Los Angeles Chargers Jets coming to MetLife Stadium to take on the New York Jets in MetLife. Jet, by the way, both teams' second Monday night game of the season. Chargers lost their Monday nighter to Dallas. The Jets won their Monday nighter in dramatic fashion against Buffalo way back in week 1, the Aaron Rodgers injury game. But the Chargers in this game on the road, despite being on the road, they are 3-point favorites to win this game. So here's what I'm looking at. So I think this is one of the more underrated matchups of certainly of this week and even of the season in terms of these are very, very talented rosters. Obviously, with the Chargers, there's massive deficiency. There's two massive deficiencies at quarterback. I'm sorry, not quarterback. Of course not. At offensive coordinator and at head coach with Kellen Moore, Brandon Staley. With the Jets, with no Rodgers, there's a massive deficiency at quarterback with Zach Wilson. So there's serious limitations on both sides, but both are incredibly talented. So the Jets have Garrett Wilson, who hasn't caught a lot of touchdowns as of late, which a lot of that's because of Zach Wilson. But Garrett Wilson's a true number one in this league. The Jets have some good offensive playmakers like Breece Hall. Defensively, we know who they are and what they represent. The Williams brothers, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed. I mean, they've got some really good players on the back end and in the front seven as well. Mosley. As for the Chargers, they're good just about everywhere. Elite at offensive line, Rashawn Slater at left tackle. We know what Justin Herbert is and what he represents. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. You got the kid Quentin Johnston, who's kind of coming into his own out of TCU. I really like that guy out of the draft. On defense, you got probably the best pass rushing duo in the league in Bosa and Mack. You got both teams have plenty of talent, plenty of Pro Bowl level players. Derwin James, by the way, I forgot to mention for the Chargers, just don't get a personal foul penalty, Derwin. Okay, just trying to pull yourself back a little bit. But both teams very talented. And both teams, by the way, desperately need to win. Because if you look at, especially the Chargers, their schedule doesn't get easier from here. The Jets, they have some tough ones as well. No question about it. Chargers are 3-4. Jets are 4-3. So this could end up being like a big tiebreaker game at season's end, where you look back, you're like, man, if this team had just beaten this team, they'd have made the playoffs. That's the type of matchup I think that we're in for tonight. I think it's going to be a little bit of a defensive battle. I think the quarterback play in New York is going to hold them back from scoring more points. The offensive play calling in LA, for LA rather, is going to hold them back from scoring more points themselves. But what it came down to is this. This game is going to come down to weakness versus weakness. The weakness at quarterback for the Jets and the weakness at defense for the Chargers. Bottom 5 in virtually every defensive category statistically, despite having a defensive head coach in Brandon Staley. I'm going to roll with the New York Jets. In the words of John Rivera and Jets fans everywhere, Jets. Jets. Give me the Jets by 3. They're 3-point underdogs. I think they'll win the game by 3, 22-19 over the Los Angeles Chargers to get to 5-3, somehow winning 5 games without Aaron Rodgers, which is a credit to them and that roster and that coaching staff. I definitely trust Saleh more than I trust Staley. Jets, get the W. I'm telling y'all, at home, I like the matchup. And I don't trust Brandon Staley, and I don't trust Kellen Moore. I don't trust Zach Wilson either, but 2 individuals to 1. It's just the math adds up, folks. The math adds up. What a weekend, though. Listen, Sunday honestly could have gone better for me. It could have. My guy Dak played awesome. Played awesome. Was the best player in the field yesterday, and Dallas lost to Philly. And then my Warriors lost to the Cavs yesterday. Listen, congratulations to Cleveland. First win over the Warriors in 2,200 plus days. Hadn't beaten us since game 4 of the 17 finals. I was freaking 14 years old. Actually, my birthday wasn't even then. Yeah, I was 13 years old. Barely a teenager last time the Cavs beat us. About time. Hang a banner up there in the whatever their arena's called in Cleveland. We'll be fine, though. All right, that's all the time we have for today's show. Thanks to everybody for stopping by. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. Be sure you know what to do. Like, share, comment, and take 2 seconds out of y'all's day. Hit that big red subscribe button. Helps the channel grow exponentially. Again, we celebrated. I'll put the graphic up again. 500 subscribers. We just reached that to Carving Up Live, so very, very excited about that. Halfway to the goal of getting 1,000 subscribers by Super Bowl 58, which is February the 11th in Las Vegas, so hopefully we can get there by then. I honest to God believe we can, so thank you so much for the support, getting us to 500, and let's get to 600. That's the next benchmark. Let's get to 600 as soon as we can. If you have subscribed, thank you so much for doing that. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, especially for taking the time out of your day to watch the show and to support the show. You don't know what it means to me. If you have subscribed, please tell those you know about it, your friends, your family, everybody you know. Okay, your accountant, everybody, your boss at work, coworkers, tell everybody about Carving Up Live. Greatly appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, it's pretty easy. A big red button down there says subscribe. Hit it. That easy. Done. Subscribed. You're part of the Carving It Up family. And of course, equally so, go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere you get your podcast via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, any and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. Very, very exciting. You got some great stuff. Great stuff brewing in the Grid. By the way, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock spot, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, Grid Network's YouTube channel, Grid Network's Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm not calling it X. Stop. I'm not doing that. All right. Great Monday night game tonight. I think it's going to be fun. I got the Jets, 22-19. Great basketball. My Warriors are going to get a dub in Detroit tonight. Very, very fun. So I'll see y'all on Wednesday. Bryson's Best 10, carving up the context. Cannot wait. See y'all then, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific time. Please be sure to stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. And please be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. And last, quickly, I genuinely apologize for delaying it this long, but prayers to all of those in the Middle East and what's going on there. It is beyond devastating. Prayers to all those involved. I wanted to say that. I feel like I needed to. All right. Great week of football. Great weekend of football that we just had. A blast. Very, very fun. See y'all on Wednesday. God bless you all. Peace out. If y'all get on Dak Prescott, I'm going to pull my hair. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.